There are few things better than a good old-fashioned kaiju smackdown, which is why I can't wait for Godzilla vs. Kong, and not just because I haven't been to the movies in longer than I care to think about. Thankfully, production is all wrapped up, so these famous movie monsters won't have to worry about social distancing. Let's take a look at the tantalizing details we have so far, and talk about what could cause these two behemoths to clash on the battlefield. Before I take you down to speculation town, let's take a look at what we know about the film so far. Unlike many other movies and television projects, production on Godzilla vs. Kong wrapped safely all the way back in April 2019, so hopefully its opening won't be delayed. Right now, it's set to hit theaters on November 20th, 2020, and it's going to be available in 3D and IMAX as well as standard 2D. Oh, and according to director Adam Wingard, it's going to absolutely knock our metaphorical socks off. The movie's gonna be rated PG-13, but Wingard claims he really pushed the limit of intense sequences of creature violence, destruction, and brief language. He also shared this petition to have King Kong shove a tree in Godzilla's mouth the way he did in the 1962 film King Kong vs. Godzilla, a scene I didn't know I desperately needed to see in IMAX until right this moment. And speaking of the great cinematic masterpiece King Kong vs. Godzilla, producer Alex Garcia has stated that this film will not simply be a remake, but rather it will bring some new and interesting aspects of giant monster fights to the big screen. Obviously, the movie takes place in a time when King Kong and Godzilla are roaming the earth, and spoiler alert, they're going to clash in a spectacular battle of the ages. We also learn that Monarch will be going on a perilous mission into uncharted terrain, looking for clues about where these earth-shaking titans came from. Meanwhile, a human conspiracy threatens to wipe the creatures, both good and bad, from the face of the earth forever. Well, unless this is both the fourth and last entry into the Monsterverse of movies, I'm guessing the human conspiracy won't be successful, but that gives us a lot to work with, especially when we consider the other details they've spilled. Apparently, Monarch must lead the way to a prosperous future alongside the Titans, keeping humanity in check. But unfortunately, different groups pop up, each hoping to use the Titans for their own goals and pushing them to outright war, which could potentially destroy all life on the planet. So needless to say, the stakes are pretty high. Michael Dougherty directed and co-wrote Godzilla King of the Monsters and also worked on the script for Godzilla vs. Kong. He had some thoughts on the movie's big matchup, and it may not be as one-sided as you're thinking. I mean, Godzilla is King of the Monsters, so it doesn't seem smart to bet against him, but Dougherty suggests not counting Kong out so quickly. He pointed out that the giant ape we saw in Skull Island was still a growing boy and hadn't reached his full potential. Godzilla vs. Kong will show us a much more grown-up monster who's developed in terms of strength, speed, and perhaps most importantly, intelligence. Yeah, Godzilla has radioactive breath, but Kong's smart enough to use tools, and he has a pair of handy-dandy opposable thumbs. Us humans manage to do plenty of damage with these bad Larrys, and we don't have anywhere near the amount of strength or biting power as a creature like Kong. Hey, I'm not throwing shade against Godzilla, but if Batman can outsmart Superman enough to gain advantage on him in Batman v Superman, then maybe we shouldn't count Kong out just yet. Dougherty actually compared this Clash of the Titans to an even bigger fictional fight, the one between Rocky and Ivan Drago. He acknowledged that us humans just like to see epic battles regardless of why they're occurring, but said that he intends for their motivations to make sense story-wise instead of just seeming forced. So obviously we know that these two both want to be king of the monsters and that they're not known for playing nicely with one another. According to the synopsis, strange seismic activity draws the attention of Godzilla and Kong alike. So one reason for their confrontation could be the fact that they're two aggressive predators who find themselves sharing space and decide to see who's top dog, or top kaiju, I guess. But Dougherty's comments about making their fight feel authentic makes me think there's gotta be more to the story. We could definitely see an initial skirmish like this, tying into what Dougherty said about Kong growing up and trying to prove that he can beat any lizard around, even if he ends up learning that's not true. But let's not forget that director Adam Wingard said he hopes this battle does more than make us cheer, he wants to make us cry. He pointed out that many monster movie fans feel a connection to these characters, even the non-human ones. Don't you feel a little bad for King Kong watching Godzilla just wail away on the poor guy? Wingard hopes fans will get emotionally invested in the movie, and I think that's something King Kong brings to the table, even if he doesn't have the impressive array of attacks Godzilla does. We've seen him display empathy for human beings, which could affect his ability to be manipulated by the rival factions mentioned in the synopsis. Not that I think that he could understand the nuance of their mission statements, but Kong has a history of trying to help out his friends in his own way. Will one of these factions find a way to emotionally manipulate Kong into going up against Godzilla? It would have to be a much bigger impact on the audience than simply using the orca to compel these creatures to fight. Or if they do try to use the orca, it would be interesting to see if either Kong or Godzilla can fight against it, or what would make them want to resist. And I don't think I enjoy rooting for Godzilla as well. Depending on the film, he's often been portrayed as a protector of humans and prefers fighting his fellow monsters, which makes sense considering they're way more of a challenge than we are. By the end of King of the Monsters, the cast mostly came around to the idea that he isn't an inherently dangerous and evil creature, although they acknowledged he's had some bad PR in the past. Seeing humans manipulating Godzilla after he did us a solid by destroying Ghidorah would also have an emotional impact. Now, let's take a look back to the post-credits scene of King of the Monsters. We saw a headline about seismic activity on Skull Island, which ties into what we know about the setup of Godzilla vs. Kong. Then, there's this cave painting, which seems to illustrate the showdown between these two creatures. Humans mucking around with the monster lineup may be new, but this ancient artwork seems to suggest that this isn't the first time these species have clashed with each other. This probably isn't a drawing of the King Kong, since he was just an adolescent when we saw him in Skull Island, but it could be one of his kind. Maybe this fight was destined to take place as part of the natural order of things, but humans will step in to make it more interesting or terrible. I'm talking about having humans not just push Kong to fight, but give him some advantages. After all, if he's capable of using tools, couldn't he possibly get a few upgrades in the form of human ingenuity? Because if they're trying to manipulate the Titans into battle to the point where they start to destroy the planet, getting rid of Godzilla would probably have to be part of the plan, since he generally puts a stop to that kind of thing. But what would really muck up the order of things would be the Mecha Godzilla. We've seen a supposed toy leak, as well as a possible hint in King of the Monsters that seems to point to his arrival. During the post-credit scene, there's an article about Monarch boosting forces around Skull Island. The article mentions a mechanized giant on Skull Island, as well as an attempt by Monarch to scare the public and drum up support. Mechagodzilla is a major game changer. In Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, he masqueraded as the real thing, which caused a lot of confusion on the part of humans wondering why Godzilla was being such a jerk. In this movie, he was created by aliens, but it's possible that a human group could be just as guilty. Let's be real, Godzilla already needs some PR work, and this definitely would not help the public opinion of him. Evildoers may use Mechagodzilla to encourage an anti-Godzilla sentiment, get the public good and riled up, and then ultimately, Godzilla will be forced to triumph over his mechanical counterpart, possibly with the help of his, well, maybe not his friend, but temporary ally, King Kong. Hey, I know the movie is called Godzilla vs. Kong, but there's no reason why they can't fight together against a common foe, albeit temporarily. Having a mechanical monster fight against organic ones like Kong and Godzilla would also help highlight the real fight between mankind and monsters. Plus, introducing Mechagodzilla would be a major move for the Monsterverse and could tie into more films further down the road. Godzilla vs. Kong is interesting because it's the sequel to both 2019's Godzilla, King of the Monsters, and 2017's Kong, Skull Island. As a fun aside, it's also the 36th Godzilla movie and the 12th in the King Kong franchise, so our favorite giant ape has some serious catching up to do. Speaking of catching up, let's take a look at the cast and which familiar faces are going to be returning besides the massive monsters. Millie Bobby Brown will return as Madison Russell after making her feature film debut in King of the Monsters, and Kyle Chandler will play her father, Dr. Mark Russell. Alexander Skarsgård will be portraying a geologist working with King Kong, despite the fact that he admits to not finding most action hero movies very interesting. He claims this character is more of a reluctant hero, and having him fight to save the day anyway makes the film more enjoyable. You know, him and the giant monsters battling each other. This was Rebecca Hall's first project following the birth of her daughter, and she'll be joined by Shana Guri, Asa Gonzalez, Jessica Henwick, and Julian Dennison, just to name a few. Of course, the human cast members are far less than the monsters, but hey, they worked hard on the film too, and depending on how the Monsterverse unfolds, we could end up seeing a lot more of them. Like I mentioned earlier, this is the fourth flick in the Monsterverse cinematic universe. This world kicked off with Godzilla and continued with Kong, Skull Island, and Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Godzilla vs. Kong will be the fourth installment, and monster movie fans are hoping it's just really the beginning. Personally, I'm hoping we get to see Mechagodzilla in this film and many others. Who do you think will triumph in this Clash of the Titans? And what do you think will draw these two together?